You're listening in on a flight test to measure how quiet the new Boeing 787 Dreamliner is during final approach to the runway. It is a sound years in the making. You see, when Boeing began designing this all-new jetliner, a small group of engineers focused specifically on the airplane's noise levels, with one goal in mind.
We were trying to make the 787 airplane come out the quietest airplane of its size and capability.
So they looked for ways to make the airplane quieter from tip to tail. The thrust of the improvement comes from a new generation of engines made by Rolls-Royce and General Electric. Both have a very high bypass ratio, which allows more air to go through the engine, while the blade spins slower and thus quieter. To further reduce noise, the engines are wrapped with advanced linings and other acoustic improvements. And as it turns out, the 787's lightweight composite fuselage and more aerodynamic wing don't just help the airplane fly more efficiently, it also affects what people hear on the ground.
If you climb higher on the same amount of energy and fuel, you've gotten further away from ears and microphones.
To validate the design, Boeing brought the 787 to a secluded airfield in Montana, where ultra-sensitive microphones were embedded along the runway. The test pilots then performed multiple takeoffs and approaches, going through every possible engine thrust setting. And for each test, they had to fly a precise path at a particular speed.
For the approaches, you'll come in, you'll pitch the airplane over, you have to pitch over to a certain location, and then the pilot's responsibility at that point is just to hold airspeed as constant as possible. Any deviations in airspeed up to, say, maybe 5 knots, 4 to 5 knots, could affect the signature of the airplane as it goes through the air.
We have to publish numbers to the 1/10 of a decibel, which is, a human ear can't hear the difference.
Early data show the 787's noise footprint will be as much as 60% smaller than today's comparable airplanes. A big step not only for Boeing, but for the aviation industry.
We have gone to great strides to try to reduce the noise signature of the airplanes, to be better stewards of the environment, better stewards of the community.
We can't expect to grow the number of airplanes higher and higher and higher unless their environmental impact is minimized.
From the outside, it's clear this Boeing 787 Dreamliner is being readied for something. And if you want to get inside, you better pay attention.
Either put on booties or take your shoes off.
Here's a behind closed doors look at the Dreamliner getting ready for the Dream Tour. During the coming months, the Dreamliner will make dozens of stops around the world. Customers and media will get up close and personal with the airplane.
The goal was really to re-energize the base, let people know what a cool airplane it is, how wonderful, how comfortable, and show them the art of the possible with the 787 interior.
The fuel-efficient Dreamliner will give passengers a whole new flying experience, bigger windows, higher interior air quality, and a cabin pressurized to an altitude 2,000 feet lower than other aircraft, all designed to enhance passenger comfort. This Boeing crew is meticulously putting the Dreamliner's cabin together, installing seats, laying out the carpet, and adjusting the lighting. Everything has to be just right.
We want to show them a pristine, just like you come into a car lot, go into the showroom, and you see the high-end car sitting in the showroom.
It's been a process, nothing overlooked. Even the livery is unique to the Dream Tour.
We're moving towards a fresher and a simpler form. It's much cleaner and more sophisticated.
And when the Dream Tour begins, the world will surely have reason to be excited about this revolutionary new airplane.
This is a piece of history being made, and everybody that's been involved with it has just been gung-ho from day one. Our commitment to this is unsurpassed by anybody.
First stop, Beijing, China.
I'll be going with it. Yeah, I'm excited.
And be sure to track the Dreamliner as it flies around the world at newairplane.com/787/Dream Tour. The year 1924, Sandpoint, Washington. A few brave airmen set out to make history by flying a Douglas World Cruiser around the globe.
I hear these pilots got into these open cockpit airplanes, braved the elements, and it was an amazing feat. It ranks up there with some of the great explorers the explorers who discovered the world.
The successful trip garnered a lot of attention, winning what would become known as the Collier Trophy. Commissioned in 1910, the Collier Trophy, awarded annually, recognizes achievements in American aeronautics and astronautics. Boeing and its heritage companies, such as Douglas Aircraft, have received numerous Collier Trophies over the years. Here's a look back at just a few. 1961. Boeing Heritage Company North American Aviation and Partners received the Collier Trophy for the X-15.
This experimental space plane. Could be launched from a B-52. It would fly into near Earth orbit. That the pilots were actually given astronaut wings. So this was some of the first time that we had pilots going into space.
And then came the golden era of aviation. Boeing jets, front and center.
1970, Boeing won the Collier Trophy for the 747, the Queen of the Skies. This was a revolutionary airplane, twice as big as any other commercial jet. It was the first jumbo jet. This giant airplane, people thought it couldn't be built. They thought it wouldn't fly. And here it was, Boeing had accomplished this amazing feat, and to this day, it's still the icon of commercial aviation.
And in 1995, Boeing had changed the aviation game yet again, with the 777, winning another Collier Trophy.
The program was one of the best airplane development programs in all of aviation history. When it went into service, the airlines immediately loved this airplane. It's changed their business. It's enabled them to open up routes that have never been flown before.
While the 777 still leads its class in design efficiency and passenger comfort, a new century brought about a whole new way of building airplanes. Enter the 787 Dreamliner. 20% more fuel efficient than its competitors, more comfortable for its passengers, with range capabilities previously known only to bigger jets.
We can go back maybe to the 1930s to find an airplane that has changed the way we fly as much as the 787 has. And I think for that, it is certainly, without a doubt, hands down, deserving of this year's Collier Trophy.
Boeing and its heritage companies have built a strong reputation, recognized the world over for advancing aviation. We are proud of our accomplishments and thankful to the National Aeronautic Association for the opportunity to claim the 2011 Collier Trophy. With China behind it, the 787 Dream Tour heads on to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And for a member of the Boeing team on board, the next stop isn't just any stop.
Really, I didn't sleep the whole night.
Flight test mechanic Abebe Drez has worked with this 787 since it left the factory, and now he's excited to bring the new airplane to the place where he was born.
I'm very proud. This is, most people, they don't get this opportunity.
Abebe isn't the only Ethiopian on board. In the flight deck, Captain Desta Ziru of Ethiopian Airlines flies the Dreamliner from China across Laos, Thailand, the Indian Ocean, over the Arabian Sea, and crosses the coast of Somalia, Ethiopia just beyond.
It felt great, I was very excited, but it looks very much similar to the 777. Back home, everybody's excited to see this airplane. Everybody wants to feel this airplane is really arriving. It's becoming a thrill, not a dream.
Captain Desta circles at Addis Ababa before touching the plane down, making him the first pilot ever to land a Dreamliner in Africa. On the ground, a warm yet wet welcome as the 787 gets a fire hose salute.
When that plane started circling the city and came in, everybody was just applauding and cheering.
A happy homecoming aboard the Dreamliner for Captain Desta and Abebe Drez.
Looking forward to see my family and friends. Really working on this airplane for me, it's like born again and dream come true.
Be sure to follow the Dream Tour as it continues around the world at newairplane.com/787/Dream Tour.
Flanked by the Washington Monument and Jefferson Memorial, the Dream Tour airplane made a dramatic entrance at Reagan International Airport in Washington, D.C. This is the latest stop on leg 6 of the International Dream Tour, and this visit to the capital of the United States is already different than any other of the dozens of cities this airplane has visited during nearly 6 months of globetrotting. VIPs ranging from congressmen to ambassadors are expected to visit the airplane during the days ahead, but it may be this group of high school, college, and Naval Academy students that had Mike Sinnott, the 787 Vice President and Chief Project Engineer, most excited.
This is the first really large group of students we've been able to take through the airplane.
Most of these students are from STEM programs, so this opportunity to see, touch, and experience the Dreamliner up close is more than just a cool field trip. It's a glimpse into their futures.
Now I know that I can base my courses on something like this, aeronautical engineering, math, physics, things like that, and it's definitely inspiring for me so that I can focus my studies on something like this.
Well, it's amazing because we're able to see all these theoretical things we learn come into play from a commercial standpoint. So one thing that stood out to me was the comfort level. The comfort level is at an all-time high. It's very amazing.
Sinnott says it was a treat for him to be the one giving the tour.
I think it's really important for kids to have this kind of experience because this can be the one thing, the milestone that makes them decide what they want to do. They see the airplane, they see what the effort can result in, and they just decide, boy, that's what I want to do.
Inside the nearby terminal, Boeing Commercial Airplanes CEO Jim Albaugh explained just why the Dreamliner is so different than any other airplane.
This is an airplane that I really believe is the first new airplane of the 21st century, and I say that because this is the first airplane that really uses the technologies that are available to us today. You know, all composite, you know, all electric, a whole new generation of engines.
It's technology that did not go unnoticed for the day's most notable visitor, U.S. Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood.
This plane reflects decades of creativity, innovation, and hard work by very, very smart people.
After being toured by today's leaders and tomorrow's innovators, roughly 800 Boeing employees in the D.C. area took their turn seeing the airplane up close. A great start to a Dream Tour leg that will be unlike any other.
If you understand the symbols on the side of this 787 Dreamliner, you might know just where it's headed, Beijing, China.
The decal on the right side of the airplane is the dream, 梦想 in Chinese. The 787 Dreamliner really symbolizes the dream of flying for the human beings.
In the early morning hours of December 3rd, this airplane left its hangar at Seattle's Boeing Field and was soon ready for takeoff. The signature wingtips on the 787 gracefully swoop upward during takeoff, marking the official start of the 6-month 787 Dream Tour. On board, a cadre of Boeing crew members eager to show the world just how cool this airplane is.
The big windows, the new lighting, the new architecture, the smooth ride, the lower cabin altitude, the cleaner air. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
For the crew that's taken this jet from its early days as a test airplane to its current show-ready interior and exterior, this marks a big day.
It's really neat to see this airplane in a marketing configuration and to talk to customers day to day because we don't normally get to do that. I'm looking forward to people coming on board in Beijing and being able to walk around and show them the different features of the airplane.
Over the course of the 11-hour flight from Seattle to Beijing, the views out the Dreamliner's large windows are awe-inspiring. Canada, Alaska, Russia, and eventually China pass below. Then final approach to Beijing. And a warm welcome from those eager to see the Dreamliner and all the trailblazing technology within.
I think the color, we can just press one button and to change the color by the window, and it's very, very beautiful.
It's a real new plan for our life.
China is a dynamic market, it's a fast-growing market, it's a market where an airplane like the Dreamliner is really perfect.
And it doesn't stop here. Be sure to follow the Dreamliner as it flies around the world on the Dream Tour at www.newairplane.com/787/Dream Tour.
It was a Dreamliner landing for the record books. This 787 test plane did something that no mid-size jet has ever done.
Well, that's really cool. We took off, turned left, and flew around the Earth and landed.
An around-the-world flight that set records for speed and distance for its weight class. Just 2 days before,
it's like a 2-night campout.
Boeing's history-making team of 12 packed its gear and gathered for takeoff, ready to saddle up.
Like a thoroughbred horse. We're going to let this airplane run. We're going to put it to the test and go, what can you do if you're unleashed?
I got it.
They boarded the plane with an eye on weight, a focus on safety, and the goal of testing the plane's state-of-the-art aerodynamic capabilities.
It's the most fuel-efficient airplane in its class, almost 20% more fuel-efficient than anything else of this size.
On Tuesday, December 6th at 11:02 a.m., the 787 took off from Seattle's Boeing Field. After crossing the Atlantic Ocean, the jet entered European airspace in Spain, went down the Mediterranean, across the Middle East, and over India. It landed in Dhaka, Bangladesh, marking the Dreamliner's distance record, 10,337 nautical miles traveled.
The previous record was 9,127 nautical miles, not that anybody's counting.
This picture shows the brief refueling stop in Bangladesh. Less than 2 hours after landing there, the team was in the air on the way back to Seattle. Crew members spent their time in a sparse interior, sleeping on the floor. Engineers tested systems as 6 pilots took turns at the helm.
Incredible is how everything was by the plan. The fuel burn was so spot on for the duration of flight.
On Thursday, December 8th at 5:29 a.m., the Dreamliner landed, securing its second world record, this one for eastbound speed around the world, clocking in at 42 hours and 27 minutes. There was no previous record in this weight class.
1, 2, 3.
This team tested the Dreamliner's high-performance capabilities and now has 2 world records to show for it.
The whole purpose of this world tour that we're going on is to get this airplane out in front of our customers.
It's first time to fly, so it's amazing.
It's really a dreamliner.
The LED lights, like a rainbow and different 7 colors, I think. It's so beautiful.
It's quite very advanced taste. I think the flight is very easy and very similar with 777. So I think it's for pilot, for passenger, very good airplane.
They were excited to be in the flight deck, to be in the seat, to see how the airplane responds. It's great to see their excitement in getting on this airplane and flying it for the first time.
Dream becomes real.
Plug in and get ready for an interactive flight like you've never seen before. One where it helps to have fast fingers.
3, 2, 1, go. Please select rewind.
We're on board a special test flight of the new Boeing 787 Dreamliner, where engineers are trying to overwhelm the state-of-the-art in-flight entertainment system.
3, 2, 1, please select pause.
We're testing for the worst case, such as everybody playing a movie at the same time, everybody playing a game at the same time, stopping suddenly, things that you would never have in a commercial flight.
Boeing picked 250 employees to play real-life passengers. Over the course of this 7-hour flight, they will take part in a series of group tests, and in between, they are encouraged to push the system to the limits.
I have been pushing as many buttons as I can find.
Just kind of fast forwarding and pausing and going back.
Now, let's see, I've played 3 or 4 different games, started 4 or 5 movies and stopped them. I've tried to break it, and it's not breaking, so.
To further tax the system, all the participants plug their own electronic devices into the power and USB outlets. It's a recognition that these days, airlines around the world are catering to passengers like Brooke Parashow, who want to use multiple gadgets during a flight.
I've been playing Angry Birds on my cell phone, and I've been trying to organize my email on my laptop. And I can still have a movie going as well. I'm watching Harry Potter.
This message that was there on 10-2.
For years, Boeing and its partners Panasonic and Thales have been testing the in-flight entertainment systems in the lab. But there's nothing like having a fully functioning cabin filled with people.
3, 2, 1, go.
From the 787's new dimmable windows, to the colorful LED lights in the ceiling, to the reclining business class seats.
2, 1, recline.
Every major cabin feature is tested to make sure it doesn't affect the in-flight entertainment, and that all of the 787's new systems work together to provide the most comfortable and entertaining experience.
It's the best airplane I've ever flown in. It's really, really, really nice.
You can really do pretty much more than I could probably do at home even, so it's pretty cool.
It's exactly what we thought of. It really has become the dream come true.
It's the final push before Boeing delivers the first ever 787 Dreamliner. Mechanics are opening up the airplane from front to back and putting stairs in place because tomorrow, launch customer ANA is coming to make one last inspection.
Get everything prepared for them to come through, make sure everything's nice and shiny, everything is good and right.
Inside, mechanics are checking and double-checking the major systems, even going seat to seat to manually test buttons. When you're selling a highly advanced jetliner made up of millions of parts, it comes down to the smallest of details.
It is very tedious. It's an ongoing basis until the airplane is handed over to the customer.
The next morning, a team of inspectors from ANA arrives with a long list of checks. They fan out and begin what will be a 10-hour inspection of the airplane's structure, systems, and the cabin interior.
Our inspection is very important. We have to receive the high-quality airplane for our customers.
The inspectors open with the cargo bay doors. Then it's onto the engines and the wing. Soon the flight control surfaces are given a workout. Up, down, side to side, as technicians in the flight deck go through a series of maneuvers. Every major airplane function and many minor ones are checked, including the windshield wipers.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Back in the cabin, inspectors run through different lighting schemes in the ceiling, darken the new dimmable windows, and air out the public announcement system.
Pram 30-second test, aisle 2.
The stow bins are opened and closed, the reading lights are turned on, and each socket evaluated. The toilets get flushed. It doesn't stop until the A&A team and Boeing customer support examine every facet of the cabin and agree that each one conforms to specifications.
They are very conscious of quality. They're looking at things sometimes for the third or fourth time to make sure they're as good as we can possibly get them.
2 days later, the airplane is put back together so it can clear one final hurdle. An A&A pilot joins the inspection team, and they take the 787 out for a 3 to 4 hour test flight. During the flight, many of the same functions are checked again. It's all part of the extensive pre-delivery process to make sure the airline is happy with the airplane, since they'll be flying it for decades to come.
And they know the system, so if they find any flaws, they let us know and we will correct them. People's lives depend on the quality of this airplane. People's livelihoods depend on this airplane. It's very important to have everything as designed.
When you're testing an all-new airplane, you go on so many flights, work so many weekends, they start to blend together. But for these Boeing pilots and engineers, this Saturday morning is one to remember. They're preparing to finish the last test required to certify the 787 Dreamliner.
Getting to the point where we've worked so hard for so many years to finally get to the point where at the end it's just unbelievable.
Just as the fog rolls in, the team sets off from Everett, Washington to complete function and reliability testing, where they'll put the airplane through more airline situations. It should be a breeze compared to what the 787 test fleet has already been through. Boeing put one Dreamliner into a refrigerated hangar to see if it can start up at minus 45 degrees. On the runway, pilots put the tail down on the ground to measure how slowly the 787 can take off. They slammed on the brakes while the jetliner was speeding down the runway to simulate the ultimate rejected takeoff. In the air, pilots flew the 787 at the lowest possible speed, then up to almost the speed of sound. They purposely put one Dreamliner through hundreds of stalls to make sure it can recover in such an emergency. In other flights, some of the most extreme loads were placed on the airplane to test for flutter. Upon landing, the 787 had to handle fierce crosswinds, wet runways, or just fly repeated passes to test for ground effects.
This is all done to demonstrate the robustness of the airplane in the event of almost anything that could happen to it. And in every case, the airplane has achieved exactly what we've desired.
The 787 is a revolutionary design, with its extensive use of strong but lightweight carbon composites, more electric systems, and advanced aerodynamics. All those features had to pass certification requirements. To date, the 787 test fleet has flown just over 1,700 flights, racked up more than 4,800 flight hours, and performed more than 25,000 test conditions. Pretty much everything imaginable.
I'm used to landing the airplane 100,000 pounds overweight. I'm used to flying it with the overspeed warning going off for hours on end, or flying the airplane with an engine turned off.
After flying around the western U.S. for 6 hours, the team brings the 9th Dreamliner back to Everett. Everything went according to plan. So with the sun now shining, it's time to land and make aviation history.
When the airplane landed, it had with it all of the hopes, the dreams, the hard work of the tens of thousands of men and women of Boeing and our partners around the world who have labored so long and so hard on this airplane.
For 787 Chief Pilot Mike Carricker, who was in the flight deck for the first and this last flight, it's a long journey worth savoring.
To look at all those features working together seamlessly, and you understand all the work that it took to get there, you're just so proud of the tenaciousness of the team that put it together, and you wish you all could have been there to watch it.
Like preparing a good meal, you need a lot of ingredients to serve up a new airplane.
The first item we're going to start off with is our steam oven.
From ovens to cook in-flight meals to machines that brew beverages hot and cold.
You could actually have coffee. It has a tea function.
You're in Boeing's test kitchen as an Air Canada team samples the best galley equipment for the airline's new 787 Dreamliners. The Canadian flag carrier knows that buying fuel-efficient airplanes is just half the recipe for pleasing passengers.
We need to differentiate ourselves, and customer service is what marks an airline, obviously, at the end of the day.
This is for hot water.
With suppliers located all over the world, it can take months to shop for interior components. So with the 787, Boeing created the Dreamliner Gallery, a giant showroom that brings the major vendors under one roof. Now, airlines like Air Canada can choose cooking equipment, galley inserts, bathrooms, fabrics, in-flight entertainment systems, and seats, all in one place.
There's 6 seat suppliers in this room. They're all pretty much the major suppliers in the wide body market. There's premium economy, there's economy seats, there's business class seats. See, this is our in-flight entertainment offering. We offer a standard set of 5 different monitors and some larger monitors.
We can just literally navigate from one, it feels like a different country to another, and we're able to touch and to feel and to experiment with new products that you've never used before. It helps your decision-making process so much more.
For airlines that care about customer service, everything is considered, even how the food or fabrics look under certain lighting conditions. So there's a mock cabin for them to try things out.
They basically take half the day to a full day to analyze exactly how your uniforms look in the different lighting scenes, how the food looks.
Back in the test kitchen, dinner is ready. With this high-end steam oven, the salmon comes out moist, the rice fluffy, and the beef roast barely needing a knife.
It's like butter, the texture.
There's a lot for the Air Canada team to digest. The airline has 37 Dreamliners on order, so what they decide will affect Air Canada's long-haul service for years to come.
It's a large investment that you're making for many years at a time. You want to make sure you're doing the best decision as possible.
Meet the first production Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Freshly painted in a special livery for its world debut, this airplane will be the first to enter service with launch customer ANA of Japan.
All the ANA staff loves this aircraft, and all ANA staff were waiting for this aircraft.
We're at the point where we are just about ready to hand over the keys. It has been a lot of work by a lot of people to get to this point.
With a fuselage made largely of lightweight composites, a new generation of engines, and advanced aerodynamics, the revolutionary 787 is designed to significantly reduce fuel burn and carbon emissions while enabling carriers like ANA to open new long-range routes.
And especially we want to very much expand our international network by using this aircraft.
When ANA passengers board the airplane, they will notice right away it's a Dreamliner, thanks in large part to the giant windows that are visible from every seat, the modern curves, and the LED lighting along the ceiling, all contributing to a more comfortable cabin.
We want to use the airplane to create a welcome environment to help separate the events of the ground from the events of the air, and then we're using the airplane to reconnect to this magic of flight.
Speaking of magic, passengers will be able to use an electric switch to dim the windows. No more pull-down shades, just darken or lighten with the touch of a button.
Voila!
The luggage bins are easy to use as well.
You can push this way or that way as well. And pull.
And it opens up to more space for your bags. Aside from the standard features, ANA has put their unique touch on the cabin. For example, the seat cushions move forward if you want to lean back.
So as a person reclines, they're only going to affect their own space. Nobody's ever going to recline back into you.
Another interesting feature is in the lavatory, where the toilet comes with a bidet. This first 787 is set to deliver in September, as Boeing wraps up testing and certification. The first revenue flight will come about a month after that.
We are very, very looking forward to fly actually with the passengers.
No doubt, I mean, every passenger is going to like this one.
More than 800 Dreamliners have been ordered by airlines from around the world, so if not this one, you'll see another 787 at an airport near you.
So fun to come to Oshkosh because people just love airplanes. They enjoy the atmosphere, and it makes it such an incredible visit.
I got goosebumps. Yeah. It was amazing.
So quiet, and then when it taxied in, you could have a whispering conversation.
Look down the ramp and you see tens of thousands of people, and they're looking at our airplane. It's fantastic.
While most of Tokyo Haneda Airport is sound asleep, a full-blown symphony is playing out at Gate 62. ANA and Boeing are conducting a gate check with the all-new 787 Dreamliner. making sure it fits with the jetways, the cables, and all the vehicles that service an airplane in between flights.
We have the galley carts fitted to the airplane. They're measuring out where the engines line up with the markings on the ground and verifying that all of the cables and power cords all reach the airplane.
In 45 minutes, the check is done, but the night is not over yet. A tug pushes the 787 back out so it can head toward the next gate to do it all over again. It's part of a week-long exercise to test the Dreamliner in a real airport environment ahead of its entry into service with ANA of Japan. Boeing Flight Test Director Jennifer Clemish manages the overnight gate checks, which have to happen from 11 at night to 4 in the morning.
This way the gates are open and we can pull up to them, otherwise they're being used for revenue service.
Once the 787 pulls into the gate, ANA ground handlers deploy the jetway, advancing it gently toward the airplane. They're just as careful when opening the forward cabin door, because while experienced with jetliners, this is their first time with a 787. They document and measure all of the clearances, down to the centimeter. Below, service vehicles start arriving in every direction. The fuel truck here, the water tanker there, one cargo loader up front, another one in the back. In between, the catering truck, just to name a few.
It's very clear that we are in their world, that this is what they do day in and day out, and even though it looks chaotic, it's incredibly organized. It's very cool.
Like at other airports, the gates here are not all the same, so the ground handlers again pull the trucks, cables and hoses up against the airplane, checking for proper clearances. The teams will do this for 3 nights and more than 10 different gates at Haneda. And they must wrap up before the sun rises because the airplane has to fly in the morning. So on to the next gate. We're on board the second Boeing 787 Dreamliner, rolling towards runway 23 at Tokyo Haneda Airport, lining up for an early morning takeoff. ANA and Boeing are taking the test airplane on one of 2 flights to Osaka, part of a week-long simulation as the Japanese carrier prepares to put the 787 into service. And we're off, heading southwest to Kansai International Airport. At the controls, ANA Captain Kazushika Higami, flying alongside 787 Chief Pilot Mike Carricker. In the cabin, the Boeing flight test team is joined by ANA technicians and engineers who get a chance for some hands-on experience in troubleshooting potential issues.
2 years I was just reading documents and touching all the screens from the ground, but in this airplane I could see with my real eyes.
Just minutes after takeoff, the passengers are treated to a Japanese treasure. The famous Mount Fuji, Japan's highest mountain, pokes through the clouds, offering a nice photo op. The 787 barely has a chance to flex its wing before it's time to descend toward Osaka. We arrive at Kansai International, a major hub for ANA's flights all over Asia. The 787 pulls into a gate where the exercise really ramps up. Technicians try connecting the hose that supplies cold air to the airplane while it's on the ground. Cargo loaders drive up to simulate loading containers in the front and back. IT specialists check the Wi-Fi connection so the airline could immediately download maintenance information from the airplane. And the fuel truck pulls into position, even though the 787 has enough fuel left over to fly to Hawaii. It's all part of a service-ready validation program Boeing has used successfully in the past to help the first airline launch a brand new airplane.
We can validate the airplane's design in the infrastructure, but it's to give them experience with the airplane so that when they go into service, they're prepared, they're ready, they can have fast turns.
The 787 stop at Kansai International comes a day after it flew to nearby Atami Airport, which caters to domestic flights in and out of Osaka. ANA technicians there perform the same procedures and checks at multiple gates. Next on the schedule, the 787 will head to airports in Okayama and Hiroshima for more test conditions. Back at Kansai, the crews wrap up their work in 2 hours, and just like that, the 787 is pulling back from the gate. It's time to say goodbye and head back to Tokyo. On the way to the runway, we see what is becoming a familiar sight, hundreds of people gathering on rooftops to catch a glimpse of the 787. All right, wheels up, on to the next stop. When you see the Boeing 787 in person for the first time, you can't help but take a second look.
Looking from the outside, the curvature of the wing and the shape, it's very beautiful.
Looks are nice, but these ANA technicians and engineers are really here to see the airplane's state-of-the-art hardware. And we're with them as they spend their first full day with a 787 at their home base at Tokyo Haneda Airport. There are procedures being performed simultaneously in and around the airplane, all to validate ANA's operating procedures for the 787. The Japanese carrier will be the first to fly the Dreamliner, which is more technologically advanced than any jetliner before it.
We have to prepare completely to keep the dispatch reliability 99.7 every time. It's a very important tool working with Boeing and airliner and maker.
To get ready to fly, ANA technicians are in the flight deck going through pre-flight procedures, such as checking the flight control surfaces. In the cabin, ANA engineers use Wi-Fi to download and install the airline's unique software packages, making sure they are in sync with the 787 systems. Meanwhile, ground handlers practice loading containers in the forward and aft cargo bays. There's little time to spare. Boeing and ANA have packed the week's schedule with more than 100 test conditions.
We're looking to cover all aspects of airplane operation, from maintenance to servicing to flight operations, so that when we do have entry into service with them, everything goes smoothly and as expected.
If you get the engine control left or right on the ICUS? Yeah.
Through every exercise, Boeing experts are alongside to help troubleshoot if need be. ANA technicians and engineers have learned all these procedures during training, but there's nothing like practicing on the real thing.
The 787 has a lot of versatile characteristics, and I would like to master them quickly and be comfortable in doing my job. I would like to use the experience and training I've received today to help put the 787 into real revenue service.
Yes, we can.
While the ground checks continue, Boeing engineers start briefing ANA personnel about in-flight safety on board the 787 test airplane, because tomorrow the testing will take to the sky. ANA pilots will fly to Atami Airport in Osaka using the airline's own dispatch and flight rules. Early in the morning, the 787 will join the others at Tokyo Haneda Airport and line up for takeoff. So we'll see you next on the runway. It's just after 4 a.m. in Seattle, and a Boeing ground crew is loading supplies and conducting the final pre-flight checks before a special departure. You see, this test airplane is set to fly the Boeing 787's maiden flight to Japan, home of ANA, the first airline that will fly the all-new Dreamliner.
We've done a lot of testing to get up to this moment to where now we can actually take it to the customer and we can, they can see what we're doing.
In the flight deck, ANA Captain Masami Tsukamoto and 787 Chief Pilot Mike Carricker. The two will start off the 9-hour flight.
They're loading the flight plan to the flight management computer. We already have our clearance, so we should be on our way shortly.
Once the last checks are complete, the 787 takes off, climbing just as the sun rises to paint a glowing send-off.
It was gorgeous morning, and I took 787 into the blue sky. This is my dream came true.
While this airplane has flown many extreme conditions as part of the 787 certification campaign, the goal of this flight is to simulate normal operation. A few hours into the flight, the airplane is cruising at 40,000 feet, crossing the Pacific Ocean at the top speed of Mach 0.85. It's just the kind of long-range flight the 787 was designed for.
We're not burning very much gas, and it's a very smooth flight, and it's just so exciting to let this airplane just let it run.
Once in Japan, Boeing and ANA will put this airplane through a week-long validation, flying it on actual routes to cities like Osaka and Hiroshima. It's a dress rehearsal to make sure the 787 has a smooth entry into service.
We're going to do all the things that a regular airline does. So this is the great segue between the flight test airplane of doing things and loading passengers and going on a revenue flight.
Boeing and ANA engineers didn't wait to begin some of the tests. They used new software to send real-time reports of the airplane's performance back to ANA's headquarters in Tokyo. The 787 can track many more parameters than existing airplanes, so an early diagnosis of a potential problem could speed up repairs.
Once the plane lands, task cards can already be issued, parts are already on the ground, and maintenance action's ready to take place.
It's not all work. Many of the engineers and technicians find a chance to rest up ahead of an intense week of testing. Since it is a flight test airplane, though, you don't have the usual comforts of a passenger cabin. There's no in-flight entertainment. You'll have to improvise your own. And there are no flight attendants, so you serve yourself. Still, many here couldn't be happier about making the flight.
We've been 24/7 for, I'd say, over 2 years now, so it's exciting that we're getting towards the end.
8.5 hours into the flight, the coast of Japan appears below. And soon the airplane descends onto Tokyo Haneda Airport, landing just after 6:20 a.m. local time to a very warm welcome.
Welcome to Japan!
The first 787 flight to Japan complete. It's the first of many to come for ANA.
That completes our pre-test preparation.
Though it's strapped inside a metal cage, the 787 Dreamliner is about to taxi out to the runway for its first flight.
Prepare to energize hydraulics.
By conducting this takeoff, Boeing engineers start fatigue testing of the 787, a long and grueling process that puts the plane through more than 100,000 simulated flights.
Essentially what we're trying to do is match the damage that an airplane would see over its lifetime.
Unlike static testing, which pushes the plane to extremes to see how strong it is, fatigue testing shows how the structural integrity holds up over time.
We're demonstrating the durability of the airplane, checking our structural maintenance procedures. So we do them first on this airplane before an airline has to. Validate that we do have inspection techniques where we can find any cyclical damage well before the fleet will experience it.
To simulate multiple flights, Boeing mounted the airframe onto a specially designed test rig and then connected more than 100 mechanical devices to the exterior, from the leading edge of the wing to the tail fin to the fuselage. With this setup, engineers in a nearby control room can direct the devices to apply loads to the plane, basically pushing and pulling on the surface over and over again.
So it mimics the ground-air-ground cycle.
We're going from taxi conditions to takeoff, cruise, landing, and again taxiing to the terminal essentially.
And because airlines will use the 787 on very different routes, stress analysts designed several flight profiles to recreate the range of conditions the plane is likely to face over its lifetime.
And when we come out here, we verify that our analysis said we see this. The tests, we did see this, therefore our analysis is okay.
From this day on, engineers will be testing the plane 7 days a week for 3 years. When it's all said and done, this plane will have flown about 3 times the number of flight cycles a 787 is likely to face. It's part of the exhaustive program to certify the Dreamliner.
As an engineer, it's a fantastic time.
There's a lot of pride involved to be part of a program like this and to help usher it into the public and see people flying it safely.
I love it. I consider it as my airplane.
Steve Gregg has taken care of the second 787 Dreamliner ever since it left the factory, helping to maintain the airplane as it has flown hundreds of test flights at multiple locations.
We've been to Yuma, Arizona. We've been to Victorville, California, Iceland.
Now, Steve and his team are preparing Airplane 2 for one of its last major tests, flying to Japan, home of launch customer ANA, for aviation's equivalent of a dress rehearsal.
ANA wants to test the airplane in their airports and with their crews, their pilots, so the idea is to get it as close as possible to an airline type configuration.
Boeing and ANA have been planning for years to conduct what's called Service Ready Operational Validation, or SROV, where ANA will operate the 787 on actual routes to make sure the airplane is fully ready for commercial service.
The SROV is one of the most important opportunities for us in order that ANA can introduce 787 smoothly and effectively.
Airplane 2 will fly from Seattle to Tokyo Haneda Airport in early July. It will be the 787's first visit to Asia. Once in Japan, ANA crews will get to try out their procedures on flights to airports such as Itami, Kansai, Okayama, and Hiroshima.
As you know, the 787 has new technology such as e-enabling and several new systems. So that is a good opportunity to touch up 787.
Lots of people are thrilled and lots of goosebumps here. We are very excited to see the real airplane is flying over to the Pacific Ocean to Japan.
During a recent planning meeting, the ANA and Boeing teams went through the whole agenda line by line. The week-long event is scripted down to the half hour, and the teams discussed every test condition that will be performed. This review went on for 7 hours a day for 5 days.
Pretty much every detail you can think about, we've talked about, from flight planning, like I said, to catering, to airplane movement.
So we'll have people up on the tail working, people inside doing test conditions, people working down at the landing gear. So we have to have it organized so we know who's supposed to be where.
We'll be taking care of the airplane in the evening.
Steve Gregg will be accompanying Airplane 2 to Japan as well. He and the Boeing team will work alongside ANA mechanics to perform ground procedures and nightly inspections.
It's going to be great to have the interaction with the customer, be able to help introduce them to the new airplane.
There are so many things an airline has to take care of when operating a modern jetliner. Plugging outlets in, draining fluids out, closing that door, opening this one, all before the airplane ever leaves the ground. It's why these mechanics from ANA, the first airline to fly the all-new Boeing 787, are in Seattle to train with a real-life Dreamliner.
My first impression was, what a great airplane. Being able to see it with my own eyes and touch it with my own hands is a really valuable experience.
When you disconnect there, you always latch the panel back.
Over several days, Boeing trainers and the ANA technicians go through every phase of servicing a 787 while it's on the ground. From unlocking and opening the forward cabin door, to towing the airplane in and out of a stall, to loading containers in the cargo hold. It's all procedures these mechanics have learned during maintenance training, but there's nothing like performing them on the real thing.
Having touched it for the first time as a ground handler, the displays and the locks are really easy to use.
It definitely takes practice. You have to get some training both for safety's sake as well as just the airplane systems, understanding how the airplane systems work.
It's especially true for the 787 Dreamliner, which comes with a suite of new state-of-the-art features like extensive use of lightweight composites and more electric systems. To adjust, teams from ANA have spent years preparing procedures for the 787 to ensure a smooth entry into service for passengers and crew.
It's a brand new plane, which means it comes with high expectations and, on the other hand, some worries. But having actually been able to touch it during training, all those worries have disappeared. In fact, now my expectations are even higher.
I was very impressed. They really study hard, they're very knowledgeable, they care every detail.
This select group of technicians will become teachers themselves, as they will show their colleagues back in Japan what they've learned. And they know there's a lot riding on it.
There's not much time left till we put the 787 into service, which makes today all the more valuable. I'll go back and tell all my colleagues what it was like, and we'll make our first flight a huge success.
Seeing a new airplane undergoing tests inside a hangar is normal, but when it's snowing at the same time, that's rare. You're looking at the Boeing 787 Dreamliner in what is essentially a giant freezer.
Well, you feel it when you first walk in, you take that first breath, and it just hits you.
It feels like the way I would think Siberia would be. Definitely cold.
Yes, you better dress warm if you visit the climactic laboratory at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Thanks to a massive air conditioning system, temperatures here can plummet to as low as minus 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
And this is really the only place in the world we could go in April that would give us the cold kind of temperatures that we need. We've got a lot of new systems on this aircraft, and we want to make sure that it's all functioning properly in extreme situations, especially when it gets very cold.
Before the test can begin, the 787 goes through what's called a cold soak. Basically, it's left in the freezing temperatures for hours until the structure is cold enough. Throughout the process, engineers closely track the thermometer.
I just want to see how rapidly it's coming down, if we can figure that out.
Every degree counts because the test plan is very precise, one that the whole team reviews page by page.
We'll see where we are with the jacks, and as far as with the temperatures, we won't test until the temperatures are where they need to be for the data.
Meanwhile, on board the plane, the team has put up a makeshift tent in the middle of the cabin to protect the finely tuned instrumentation equipment. This is the one part of the plane that has to stay warmer than the outside.
So you don't see any loss of data. And that's really why we're here, is to get the data to figure out if there's any anomalies within our systems.
The wintry weather does present challenges along the way.
The pens aren't working. So we've got a multitude of pencils.
Once the plane reaches the right temperature, it's time to test.
Today we are starting up the airplane for the first time at minus 40 degrees. We're making sure all the airplane systems function, including the cactus and the hydraulics and the electrical system as well.
So we're here to validate that the airplane then recovers when we go to start it, so that our airline customers, when they're in a similar situation, they have confidence that the airplane will do what we said it will do.
Boeing 001 Heavy externalities verified squawking 4717.
4717 on the 12 for Boeing 001.
Here she comes, the 787 Dreamliner. Captain Carricker, Captain Neville behind the controls. I have 1:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, a flight slightly over 3 hours. The first flight of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner is now complete.
We're on aircraft ZA001. It's the first flight test airplane in the 787 fleet. My name is Scott Peterson. I'm a test director for flight test. I'm just going to show you some of the ins and outs, what all these components are that you see in the airplane. Obviously, once you first step in, you can see it's not a typical airliner type airplane. Behind me are the black. These are our water ballast tanks, and this is the way we control the center of gravity on the aircraft. So when we want a forward CG, we fill the tanks up front here with water. They represent quite a bit of weight, which moves our center of gravity forward or aft, depending on the flight test we're doing that day. We're mid-cabin now on ZA1. This is the start of our instrumentation racks. This airplane has miles and miles of orange wire, you'll see. And all these orange wires go out to pressure transducers, position transducers, load, strain gauge devices, thermocouples, and all of that, all of those parameters are routed here into the cabin. This is primarily where the flight test engineers and our staff engineers sit, and they collect all that data that I just spoke about earlier. So they will sit and monitor via the screens as well as the strip charts. And these strip charts are really important, and they provide a time history of our data that's coming into the, for whatever particular test we're doing. They will evaluate that data real time to make sure the airplane's safe within its envelope and we're not stressing the airplane. Okay, so this is where our Rolls-Royce supplier partners, they'll sit here and monitor their engines, the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engines. They monitor all the critical parameters that the engine can put out. These are our aft bank of water ballast tanks, and as I mentioned earlier, it's to control the center of gravity, so these may be completely filled to get an aft CG situation. Now we're at the aft cabin. You can see the large trailing cone winch, and the trail cone is meant to measure static pressure. So we send the hose with some ports at the end about 200 feet aft of the airplane, and we'll take that static air pressure and monitor it or compare it with the pitot pressure, and that'll give us a real accurate airspeed. Well, it's been a pleasure showing you the inside of the first flight test airplane. We in flight test already know it's a great airplane, and it's going to be even better for our airline customers. I feel honored and privileged to be part of the 787 team, and want to thank you for allowing me to show you around the airplane today.
From dragging the airplane's tail on the runway to flying head-on into fierce crosswinds, Boeing pilots have been pushing the 787 Dreamliner and moving ever closer to certifying the all-new airplane.
When we do these big tests, it's a big deal because it is the test.
After spending weeks on the road, flight testing in multiple locations, 787 Chief Test Pilot Mike Carricker returned to the office for a brief break and described some of the tests he and the team have been conducting, such as takeoff performance.
You start with regular takeoff, like we recommend our airlines crews do all the time. And then what we do is we go around and we look at how much you can vary from it. You rotate before the predicted airspeed, you rotate after the airspeed, you rotate too fast, you rotate too slow, and it's all to define that there's a tolerance for error.
There was little margin for error when Captain Carricker maneuvered ZA001, the first Dreamliner, for a takeoff test called Velocity Minimum Unstick, or VMU. This test establishes the lowest speed the airplane can leave the ground and requires putting the tail on the runway, carefully.
You don't want to hold the tail on the ground because that's actually a big brake and it'll slow the airplane down. You will never get up to takeoff speed. But then again, you can't let the tail come up because then you're missing your data. And so the idea is to get the tail down quickly, smoothly, and just hold it on the ground. Just hold it on the ground, and then hold that attitude, and then you have to fly away.
Next up, landing the Dreamliner on very wet pavement. Crews dumped more than 50,000 gallons of water on an ungrooved runway. Then Captain Carricker had to pull off 2 landings.
We do one with the manual brakes, and then we do another one using the airplane's automatic braking system. We demonstrate that the tires spin up and that the anti-skid system works per design. And we use a normal technique for the pilots so they don't have to do anything different.
Wet is one thing, windy is another. ZA002, the second Dreamliner, fought winds of 30 knots to prove the airplane is designed to handle high crosswinds.
One of the kind of conditions that requires more piloting skills.
Dan Mooney, Vice President of 787-8 Development, explains how the pilots positioned the plane for landing.
The pilots actually crab the airplane to angle the nose of the airplane into the wind. At a certain point, the pilots will begin to turn the airplane back down to line up with the runway just in time for touchdown.
We're really doing well in the airplane part, and it's very exciting to see all these individual parts starting to be added up.
And soon Captain Carricker and the team will be back up in the air to test some more. Look around Jack Terrell's office and you can see the Continental Airlines maintenance supervisor is excited about a certain new airplane.
Oh yeah, everybody's excited about it. It's a new way of thinking and new technology.
Last Thursday, Jack didn't have to rely on posters on the wall. He just had to look outside. The fifth Boeing 787 Dreamliner, returning from flight tests down in Bolivia, stopped off at Houston Intercontinental Airport. It was a chance to meet the people who will help the newly combined Continental and United become the first U.S. carrier to fly the all-new airplane.
It's our first glimpse. We're anxious to get it and finally get to see the real thing. It's just excellent.
Oh, it's an amazing aircraft. Been waiting a long time for this. It's beautiful.
We're really looking forward to flying some really great places on this airplane.
How does it look?
Incredible. It looks like I hoped it would. Very state-of-the-art. It looks fast.
Terrell's co-workers took the opportunity to tour the test airplane, including the advanced flight deck with its suite of digital navigation tools like the dual head-up display.
You can sit there and aim right at the point of the runway you want to touch down on.
Looks very modern. It looks like how an aircraft should in 2011.
Okay, 1, 2, and 3.
Other employees walked around the jetliner, snapping photos and touching the carbon composite skin. That's the lightweight material that helps the 787 fly farther and use 20% less fuel. It's why Continental ordered 25 of the Dreamliners.
Banked our future on this aircraft. We're big believers in the 787 and flying in long, thin markets. One of the first routes we'll fly is Houston-Auckland, and to me this is the poster child airplane for that route.
Speaking of children, there were a few young guests. Jeffrey DeVore, a Continental dispatcher, said he wanted to bring his 3-year-old son here to see the future of flying.
These are the type of airplanes that we can go, from Houston to Auckland, and for flights that we've never done before, the stage lengths that we've never seen before.
After a few hours on the ground, the Dreamliner had to depart to return to Seattle for more flight tests. Boeing is intent on wrapping up certification as soon as possible so it can start delivering 787s to great carriers like Continental and United.
Hangar B, Jack.
Jack Terrell can't wait.
We're going to have the most fun with it. We'll be in it, on it, around it, taking it apart, and putting it back together.